It was just another ordinary day. The kind of day where nothing foreshadows the terror that's about to unfold. The morning sun shone brightly as my mother and I went about our daily routines. She busied herself in the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the scent of pancakes. She always loved making breakfast. It was her way of saying good morning without uttering a word. Outside, the neighborhood was coming to life. Birds chirping, kids on their bikes, dogs being walked. It was in all respects a typical suburban scene. People waved, exchanged pleasantries, all while going about their business. It was the kind of day that could lull you into a sense of safety, a sense of normalcy. No one could have predicted the nightmare that was about to descend. The sun was setting, the day was winding down, and yet, we were oblivious to the horror that was creeping upon us. There was something off about Mr. Thompson, our next-door neighbor. He was different, but not in the way people usually change. Our neighbor, Mr. Thompson, was the quintessential friendly guy next door, always ready with a warm smile, a helping hand, and a seemingly endless supply of dad jokes. But recently, something about him had shifted. It was like he was a different person altogether. His skin, usually ruddy from days spent working in his garden, had turned pale and almost translucent. It was as if he hadn't seen the sun in weeks. Then, there were his eyes. Once full of life and laughter, they were now vacant, devoid of any emotion. It was a chilling sight. The eyes that used to twinkle with mirth now seemed to be staring into an abyss. They were the eyes of someone lost, someone trapped in a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. His behavior had taken a turn for the odd as well. The man who once loved to chat about everything under the sun now barely spoke a word. He had become withdrawn, almost reclusive, and when he did speak, his voice carried an undercurrent of aggression that was both unsettling and wholly out of character. My mother, ever the optimist, brushed off my concerns. "It's probably just stress or some sort of illness," she would say, trying to reassure me. "Give him some time, he'll bounce back." But deep down, I knew it was something more, something that couldn't be explained away by stress or illness. There was an air of dread that seemed to surround Mr. Thompson, a palpable sense of uneasiness that sent shivers down my spine. We should have known better. We should have seen the signs. Little did we know the nightmare was only just beginning. The familiar world we knew was about to be turned upside down, and our lives would never be the same again. Soon, we would come face to face with a reality far more terrifying than anything we could have ever imagined. That night, the silence was deafening. But then, the silence broke with a bone-chilling scream from next door. A sound so petrifying it could turn blood to ice. It was a cry of pure terror, an echo of dread that hung heavy in the air, a harbinger of the horror that was to come. Suddenly the tranquility of the night was replaced by a symphony of fear. The hush was shattered by gut-wrenching sounds. Imagine a cacophony of groans and growls, the relentless scratching at the door, the desperate pleading of the wind. Every shadow seemed to dance, every gust of wind seemed to whisper warnings of the approaching terror. The silence of the night had been a blanket, a safe cocoon. Now, it had been torn away, replaced by a veil of fear. As the sounds grew louder, our heartbeats raced, pounding against our chests like a drum echoing in the abyss of the night. It was clear something sinister was afoot. Something was out there, something that reveled in the fear it was causing. The terror was palpable, a thick fog that seemed to seep into every corner of our home, suffocating us. The fear was not the usual kind, it was a primal fear. A fear that made your skin crawl, a fear that made you question reality. It was a fear that made you realize that nightmares could indeed come true. My mother and I, clinging onto each other, decided to face the unknown. To face the source of the terror that had turned our peaceful night into a night of horror. We moved cautiously, every step an act of defiance against the fear that threatened to consume us. We were two solitary figures in the darkness, stepping into the unknown, armed with nothing but our courage. As we reached the door, the sounds grew louder, more desperate. The door creaked open, revealing the source of the terror that had turned our night into a living nightmare. The sight that met our eyes was something we could never have imagined, something so terrifying, so grotesque, it defied reality. We thought we were prepared for what we might find. We were wrong. In the dimly lit room we found Mr. Thompson, or what was left of him. He was no longer human. His skin was a sickly pallor, his eyes devoid of the warmth they once held. Instead, they were filled with an insatiable hunger, a primal urge. Mr. Thompson, our friendly next-door neighbor, had become one of them, a zombie. The realization hit us like a punch to the gut. We were frozen in place, our hearts pounding in our chests, but we had to move, we had to get away. We turned to flee, but our escape was cut short. The door we had entered through was now blocked by a horde of the undead. They were everywhere. Our world, once filled with the mundane tasks of daily life, was now overrun by these monstrous creatures. In that moment we understood the terrifying truth. The world as we knew it was over. But the real horror was yet to come. The horror that was closer to home than we ever imagined. The chilling realization dawned on me, as cold as the night itself. My mother, my rock, the woman who had held my hand through every dark alley and nightmare was changing. The bite from Mr. Thompson, which we had dismissed as a mere scratch during our frantic escape, had left a mark deeper than skin. Her eyes, once warm and comforting, now glowed with an eerie luminescence. Her laughter, which used to fill our home with joy, had turned into a guttural growl, echoing through the silent corridors. The monster we had been fleeing from, the horror we had been trying to escape, had found its way into our sanctuary. In the end, the horror was not outside. It was within our own home, within our own family. It was my mother. What if the one ride you thought would be fun turns out to be your worst nightmare? Picture this. A young couple, armed with nothing but their love and a sense of adventure, embark on a journey that promises laughter and memories. The boy, full of youthful exuberance, drives while his girlfriend, the epitome of vivaciousness, keeps the atmosphere light with her infectious laughter. But as fate would have it, their joyride takes an unexpected turn. The car, their trusted companion, gives up on them in the midst of an isolated, eerie jungle. They find themselves marooned, the silence of the wilderness their only company. The chirping of the crickets and the howling wind are their only soundtrack. The puncture, a minor inconvenience under normal circumstances, becomes an ominous sign of the horror that awaits them. As the shadows of the night grow longer, so does their anticipation. As the silence of the night grew, so did our fear. Do you know the feeling when you're not alone, even when there's no one around you? It's a sensation that sends chills down your spine, as if icy fingers are lightly brushing your skin. An eerie uneasiness crept over us, chilling the very air around our broken-down car. We were stranded in a forest, a sea of trees surrounding us, their looming shadows dancing menacingly under the moonlight. Suddenly my girlfriend's sharp intake of breath cut through the silence. I followed her gaze and spotted a group of people emerging from the dense foliage. Initially, relief washed over me, but as they came closer, the relief quickly turned into a feeling of dread. There was something off about them. Their movements were slow, almost mechanical, as if they were puppets being pulled by unseen strings. Their staggering walk, the odd tilt of their heads and the ghastly pallor of their skin, it all seemed unnatural. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to call out to them, but my voice was swallowed by the vast emptiness of the forest. I could barely hear my own words over the deafening silence that had fallen over us. The only sound was the rustling of leaves under their dragging feet, growing louder with each passing moment. As they came into the clearing, illuminated by the moonlight, we saw them clearly. Their eyes, those eyes were not human. They glowed with an unnatural light, a sickly yellow that reflected the moon's eerie glow. It was a sight that sent a jolt of terror through me, freezing me in place. It was a sight that I knew, deep in my heart, was a harbinger of something terrible. A sight that was burned into my memory, haunting my dreams for the nights to come. It was a sight that I knew would change our lives forever. In the darkness, their eyes glowed with an unnatural light. A sight I'll never forget. What do you do when you realize the danger you're in, but it's too late to escape? I had to answer that question in the most horrifying way possible. The moonlight revealed the truth about the approaching group. They were not humans, but flesh-eating creatures from a nightmare. A horde of zombies, their eyes void of humanity, their bodies grotesquely twisted. Fear wrapped its icy fingers around my heart, but we were cornered, trapped in this jungle, with our only hope of escape now a useless piece of metal. My mind raced, and adrenaline surged through my veins, pushing me into action. I grabbed a fallen branch, my only weapon against these monsters. With every swing, every hit, I fought for our lives. The sounds of the night were drowned by the guttural growls of the undead and the pounding of my own heart. Every now and then I'd glance towards her, making sure she was safe, but the number of these creatures seemed to multiply with each passing second, and I was slowly being overwhelmed. I fought with everything I had, every ounce of my will, every shred of my strength. But amidst the chaos, I lost sight of her. The last glimpse I had was of her terrified face, her eyes wide with fear before she was swallowed by the sea of undead. But amidst the chaos I lost sight of her. Ever wondered how it feels to see your loved one change into something monstrous? It's a chilling experience, I can assure you. A chill that seeps into your bones, freezing your very soul. I found her, my girlfriend, in the midst of those shambling figures. Her once vibrant, lively eyes were now hollow, devoid of any recognition. The girl I had known, the girl I had loved, was lost. In her place stood a creature devoid of humanity, driven by a primal urge for flesh and blood. A gut-wrenching realization struck me, my breath hitched, my heart pounded against my ribcage like a desperate prisoner. This wasn't a nightmare, this was reality. She was one of them. A zombie. In a foolish bout of hope, I reached out to her. My voice, once strong and confident, now trembled. I called out her name, pleading, begging for her to remember me. The sound echoed in the silent night, a desperate cry swallowed by the eerie stillness. For a moment it seemed as if she hesitated. A flicker of confusion crossed her grotesque face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. The girl I loved was truly gone. I saw her eyes glow in the darkness, just as those of the other zombies did, and then, she lunged at me. Have you ever felt that cold shiver down your spine when you step into the unknown? I'm sure we've all had that moment of eerie anticipation. It was the exact sensation my two buddies and I experienced as we embarked on our journey into the uncharted. There was me, the curious one, always up for an adventure. Then there was Jake, the brave one, never shying away from a dare. Lastly, there was Sam, the cautious one, balancing our reckless enthusiasm with a pinch of prudence. We were a motley crew of thrill-seekers, each driven by our unique motivations. There was a palpable mix of excitement and apprehension in the air as we prepared for our expedition to an infamous abandoned place. A place whispered about in hushed, fearful tones, known for its chilling atmosphere. A place where the line between reality and the supernatural seemed to blur. We were ready, or at least we thought we were. We had no idea what awaited us in the thick, ominous darkness. As we stepped out of the car, the silence was deafening. A cold wind whipped around us, sending a chill down our spines, the kind that makes your hair stand on end. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long, unsettling shadows that danced around the derelict buildings. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, the kind that preludes a storm. It was as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath, waiting for us to make our move. An uncanny feeling crept over us, a prickle at the back of our necks, as if unseen eyes were tracking our every movement. There was a faint whisper on the wind, an ethereal melody that seemed to echo from the depths of the forgotten place. A rustle in the underbrush, a shadow flitting across our peripheral vision, a distant howl that chilled our blood. The haunted place was alive and it was watching us. We were on the edge, but we decided to push forward. Suddenly, we saw it, a figure lurking in the shadows. Unearthly it was, neither man nor beast, but something grotesquely in between. Its silhouette warped and twisted in the dim light, the edges of its form flickering like an old film reel. Something about it was eerily familiar, yet entirely alien. It was as if a nightmare had taken form right before our eyes. It moved with an unnatural grace, a predator stalking in the night. We could hear the soft rustle of leaves as it moved, the faintest echo of a growl that sent chills down our spines. Was this a zombie, its flesh rotting away as it hunted for the living? Or was it a lost spirit, trapped between this world and the next, its existence a mere echo of a life once lived? But then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, vanished into the night, leaving behind only fear and unanswered questions. Was it a figment of our imagination, or was there really something out there? In that moment we heard a ghastly growl behind us. A chill ran down our spines and our hearts pounded like war drums in our chests. We turned on our heels and bolted, our footsteps echoing through the desolate place. The air hung heavy with an unseen dread, and the guttural growls of our pursuer filled the silence, growing louder, closer. Every shadow seemed to leap out at us, every rustle of wind sounded like the whisper of a phantom. The adrenaline pumping through our veins made us feel alive and terrified at the same time. Our breaths came out in ragged gasps, our lungs burning, our legs aching, but we had to keep going. Running, we could hear the thing behind us, its footsteps an ominous rhythm in the night. The fear was like a living thing, gnawing at our courage, whispering in our ears that we wouldn't escape. We were being hunted, and we didn't know by what. Just when we thought it was the end, we saw the exit. Our hearts pounded in our chests, the adrenaline rushing through our veins like a runaway train. With every ounce of strength we had left, we bolted towards the exit. leaving behind the eerie figure and the chilling horrors it brought. The taste of freedom was so close we could almost taste it. We managed to escape, but the relief was tinged with an unsettling sense of dread. As we left the haunted place, we couldn't shake off the image of the terrifying figure. Was it a zombie, a lost spirit, or something else entirely? The uncertainty gnawed at us, leaving us with a chilling sense of unease. Even as we put distance between us and the haunted place, the questions lingered. We escaped with our lives, but the haunting encounter remained etched in our minds, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. We escaped, but the question lingers. What was that figure? A zombie, a lost spirit, or something else entirely, perhaps? We'll never know.